sufficient settlement of claims by Arthur Wheeler under the workers' compensation statute. We have a motion to approve 4 through 34. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? That was unanimous. Item 35 is a resolution of the council declaring the preferences of the city relative to the proposed alignments for the Interstate 35 trade corridor bypass and the outer loop for the metropolitan Oklahoma City area. Your motion to adopt or reject the resolution.
Move adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Before we discuss the issue, we'll read the resolution so that those of you in the audience will know exactly what's being voted on. Pardon me. Whereas an outer loop major investment study, MIS, has been commissioned by the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, ACOG, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, ODOT, and the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, the OTA, and whereas a simultaneous study is being conducted regarding a possible I-35 trade corridor bypass around the metropolitan Oklahoma City area. And whereas the Council of the City of Norman recognizes the citizens concerned about the future development of Norman and the impact of any major transportation facility will have. And whereas the City Council in its meeting of February 25th, 1997, reviewed and adopted the Norman 2020 Land Use Plan and Transportation Plan, which includes a proposed alignment for an outer loop generally consistent with the currently adopted OCART's 2020 plan for the same facility. And whereas there were public meetings held in Norman on June 16, 1998 for presentation and discussion of the outer loop study, and on December 8, 1998 for a presentation and discussion of the selected viable alternatives, the 4 remaining proposals. And whereas any proposed I-35 trade corridor bypass and/or an outer loop alignment placed between the urbanized core of Norman and Lake Thunderbird would produce the most negative social, economic, environmental impacts on the citizenry of Norman, be it therefore resolved that any routing of an I-35 trade corridor bypass should be located east of Lake Thunderbird, and that consistent on the above-mentioned I-35 trade corridor bypass being east of Lake Thunderbird, the City of Norman supports alternates X, Y, or Z, since such routing or any reasonable similar alternative thereto would be wholly consistent with the city's adopted Norman 2020 plan, land use and transportation plan. The city would prefer that such facility be built as a limited access parkway, and that the above described facilities cannot be assured, then the City of Norman would support as being the next best option, a modified outer loop, ZZ, which goes east of Lake Thunderbird and does not utilize the existing State Highway 9. Now, this is a resolution in response to the viable alternatives that were presented to us by the 3 mentioned entities, ACOG, ODOT, and the OTA, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. I want to emphasize to you people, this is not a City of Norman project. It's a state project. We are responding to the alternatives that have been presented to us. This resolution endorses the corridor known as X, Y, and Z. This corridor is consistent with our adopted 2020 Land Use and Transportation Plan. It's also consistent with OCART's. The second part of the resolution deals with the I-35 trade corridor bypass. It states that it should not come between the urbanized part of Norman and Lake Thunderbird. Now, you got to realize there are 2 different studies happening here, and they're both coming together, but they're 2 separate things. There's a loop and there's a bypass. We're taking a position on both. We don't want any bypass that traverses Norman through there. Again, we as a council are expressing our preferences to the alternatives that have been presented to us. We encourage you to do the same. And to help you do that, the people and the organizations to whom you should express your concerns are available at the back table. We have who they are, their addresses, and where you should send your comments, and we encourage you to do that. That is an important part of the process. We as a council are doing what we have heard from the citizens and is consistent with the plan that's already adopted with the City of Norman. So that's what we're doing here. This is not a hearing on whether there should be one or not. That's not really in our purview. Our purview is we're trying to do what we think is best for the total community of Norman on the alternatives that are presented. Doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with all of them, but we're telling the best that's available to the four that are presented. That's what we're here to do. Now, with all that said, to try to explain, because there's been a lot of misinformation put out on the internet, there's been a lot of misinformation put in your mailbox about what's really happening tonight. We thought that you ought to have that explanation. Now, how many of you would like to speak to the council concerning this issue? Okay, that's not too bad. We'll get through here. The procedure is, if you will come to the podium, and those of you who would like to speak, it would be nice if you would line up. You need to state your name and address for the record. We'll be happy to hear what you have to say about that. We would like to keep it to the resolution if possible. We would appreciate brevity, but you say what you need to say. If the previous speaker has already said what you need to say, you can say ditto Mrs. Jones or something, and we'll get the gist of it. And then after that, we will go about and take the vote on the resolution or whatever we need to do. We're kind of reversing this a little bit. We'll give you the opportunity to speak first. And so, who would like to be first? Okay. Attaboy. And if the rest of you that expressed an interest, if you want to go ahead and start lining up, that would be nice. We'll be happy to do it.
Well, good evening. My name is Dave Moore, 1108 West Main. I also own property around 96th and Post Oak that my wife and I have been paying on for the last 10 years. Hoping to build there someday and to will it to our children, our little piece of God's little acre. We'll also be meeting here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in this very room to consider strategies to stop this NAFTA corridor and outer loop madness. I also work with a group called Control the Loop. We are firmly opposed to this resolution for many reasons. I'm only going to give you a few of them. I'll try to be brief. We've been told all along by the state and federal authorities that the outer loop project and the trade corridor bypass are going to come together just like you expressed. In their eyes, no matter what they have said otherwise, they still consider them to be one and the same. This resolution implies in Section 6 that it is responding to numerous inputs by citizens throughout Norman received by the City Council. This is an impossibility. We have spoken with thousands of Norman citizens and have covered every square mile of Norman east of 48th Street. And I have yet to speak to one person that supports any of the NAFTA corridor outer loop proposals suggested by the state and federal highway folks. In fact, I spoke with one city council member just this past Sunday night who told me that I was the first person to talk to him about any of this stuff. So the implication that this resolution is the result of numerous inputs by the people of Norman is false. In fact, I've spoken with members of the advisory board to the Outer Loop Steering Committee who told me that it has been next to impossible for them to get straight answers to numerous important and specific questions about what the various NAFTA corridor outer loop proposals really mean. Some of them have been told to shut up and go along with the process or face being ostracized. Based on that alone, the City Council is not qualified to make a decision on the proposed corridors. If duly appointed members of the advisory board can't get answers, I know you guys don't have them either. The resolution further states that corridors X, Y, and Z are wholly consistent with the Norman 2020 plan. This is ridiculous. Anyone with half a brain can look at the Norman 2020 map, which you passed out, and I wish you had also passed out the maps given out by the state. Anybody with half a brain can look at the Norman 2020 map, look at the state's outer loop map, and see that X, Y, and Z go much farther east than the loop in Norman's 2020 plan, as much as 2 to 3 miles farther. And they cut a swath 2 miles wide. Now, I've heard all the smoke and mirrors doublespeak about how the actual highway itself may only be 800 feet wide. But the federal and state authorities have, throughout this entire process, expressed that they intend to control a corridor 2 miles wide. Now, I was puzzled by that for a long time. I wondered, why is that? The answer lies in the state's own outer loop study, which states on page 3, an additional lane of pavement to an existing roadway with restricted right-of-way may be more complex than a new roadway within a more flexible corridor. So the federal and state highway boys want to control a corridor 2 miles in width so that they won't have to deal with pesky problems such as right-of-way restrictions or private property ownership. Corridor ZZ, as well as Corridor F, totally flies in the face of the Norman 2020 plan and is totally contrary to its intent and purpose, which was to limit growth in East Norman. To suggest that Corridor ZZ as an option is to suggest a horrifying modification to Norman's 2020 plan, which, according to state law, cannot be done without due process. If you approve the resolution before you, you will be sending a message to the federal and state highway boys that the resolution expresses the will of the people of Norman, a message which would be a lie. Thank you.
Mayor Thompson, my name is Cindy Morrison Whitmore, along with the Burrells, Misers.
State your address.
3113 East Tecumseh Road.
Thank you.
I do not feel like this highway should go through Tecumseh Road because there's a lot of old-time businesses that's been there, including the Leslies and our home-owned feed store and chicken farm that used to be there. There was also an Indian reservation that used to be there for Mrs. Kuhlman that we've heard of, but she's passed on. And I think we should take the route of going through Paul's Valley, which they want, for more business there. And if it comes to our road, then there'll be a lot of people out there that they're going to have to kill.
Notifying the people on the proposed path of this outer loop so that they had a chance to voice their opinion. I called as many neighbors as I could, and none of them knew about it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
My name is Michele Moore, and I own property at the intersection of 96th and ZZ. One thing that I think has not been mentioned that needs to be mentioned, and I've been to the 2 public meetings that were held in the Norman area by the state and fed boys, is that one of the options before everyone is no build. Now, if you study the final evaluation that has been put out by ACOG, DOT, and Turnpike Authority, where they evaluated 50 some odd possible routes, the top 5 solutions are no-build solutions, but they're not telling any of us this. At that meeting we went to in, I guess, December up at Norman Votech, the entire focus was, where should it be? Where should we put it? Get everybody focused on the issue of where does the road belong? When in fact the question is, should the road be built at all? And I do not believe, nor do I accept, that you guys have your backs against the wall where you are forced to pick some ridiculous option that none of us really like, and you'd do good to find somebody here tonight who's in favor of any of them. Just because you think you have to do something, you have to give them something. You don't have to give them something. You have to vote the will of the Norman people, and if it is no build, well, by golly, it's no build. Now, I've been authorized by a member of the advisory committee who has attended all of these steering committee meetings to which the advisory board were present. Her name is Lee Butler. She's a Norman resident. She couldn't be here tonight, and she gave me her statement for the record. And she has, inside information on what's been going on with all of this because she's been present at all of them. And this is her statement. To whom it may concern, I became interested in the Outer Loop MIS in May 1998. I own land within several of the proposed corridors and was concerned as to how the loop would affect our rural area. Repeated inquiries to the agencies conducting the study, whose names we obtained from the Loop website, failed to provide the answers we sought. We expressed enough interest that an Association of Central Oklahoma Governments representative suggested that we attend the advisory board meetings as citizens members. Since that time, we have attended advisory board meetings, all the public meetings, and examined every scrap of information we could obtain regarding the Outer Loop. We listened to what people had to say when the issue was discussed. It is our conclusion that all 5 of the Outer Loop proposals currently under consideration are flawed for the following reasons. The safety of our drinking water is a concern to everyone. 4 of the 5 alignments lie in the area between Lake Draper and Lake Thunderbird, crossing Little River and Hog Creek, which flow into Lake Thunderbird, which supplies drinking water to Norman and several other communities in the area. All 5 of the alignments lie within the recharge zone for the Garber-Wellington Aquifer, which supplies water to many private and municipal wells within the metro area. We believe that the current alignments could jeopardize our water supply. The social aspects of the loop proposals are no less significant. All of the corridors pass through low to moderately populated areas. Many homes, farms, and businesses would be destroyed in the name of progress. We believe that the social disruption caused by the displacement of families and demolition of neighborhoods and businesses in any of the corridors would be totally unacceptable. The Outer Loop Committee has not demonstrated to our satisfaction that they have examined all the aspects of their proposals. In a published report dated June 1997, the Oklahoma City Area Regional Transportation Study proposed an outer loop which roughly corresponds to Corridor X. The portion of the loop east of I-35 was a conceptual corridor, which was not deemed necessary until after 2020. No costs or impact studies were documented for the East Loop facility at this time. Public meetings were held in April 1998 to discuss mobility issues in the metro area. Then in September 1998, the Outer Loop Major Investment Study conceptual alternatives were presented to the advisory board for review. In October 1998, the preliminary evaluation of the alternatives was released. In December 1998, the steering committee presented to the public their recommended viable options. A total of 42 highway routes were rated on their environmental, engineering, and mobility considerations and reduced to 5 options in a period of 3 months. Clearly, this is an insufficient period to fully evaluate the impacts of each of the proposals. We challenge the concept that the Outer Loop is truly designed with the mobility considerations of metro residents in mind. Interchanges with existing roads common to all the loop proposals have not been identified. We believe that the cost of the Outer Loop far outweighs its benefits. Once a facility like this is established, it must be maintained. Our children will bear the burden of having to sustain this facility in the future. The monies invested in the Outer Loop could be used to upgrade existing roads and bridges without placing additional burdens on future generations. For the above listed reasons, we do not endorse any of the Outer Loop proposals currently under consideration and urge everyone to contact the sponsoring agencies to voice their disapproval for all of the proposed alignments. Sincerely, Lee Butler. Now, I would simply say that I hope you all will have the courage to realize that you are not being forced to respond to any of these proposed routes. You don't have to say it is the will of the Norman people that we pick this route over that route. I'm a no-build person, and the top 5 solutions of their own evaluation study says no build. So who's lying to who? I'm leaving this here for Lee for your consideration. Thank you very much.
My name is Dewey Kaufman. I live at 7606 Cedar Lane Road, which was is within 1 mile of the center of one of these 2-mile corridors. I've lived in Norman 29 years, and I haven't heard NAFTA mentioned since the proposal went through. I used to attend a lot of meetings, and one of the bottom line comments was, if NAFTA goes through, the United States will be a land bridge for trade between Canada and Mexico. And it comes up, I had no idea that Norman was going to be involved in this, and that looks to me like what it is. Now, I only vaguely became aware of what's going on, and am not fully cognizant of what you can and cannot do, but I will be a committee of one to find out. I do not think we should have such a corridor in Norman. If it's going to be in Norman bypass, I certainly think it should bypass Norman. Certainly we should protect our water supply at Lake Thunderbird and probably go around to the east. I can tell you this, I am very familiar with the land and properties out that way, and there is a lot of property out east of Lake Thunderbird and south of Norman where you could build 2 of these corridors and it probably would not bother anyone. It should split off way south of Norman and go way around the lake, in my opinion. And I do not know where that leaves you tonight, but I will make myself an activist to try to see that it stays out of Norman. By background, I've always worked in agriculture, and I'm very familiar with land use and the quality of land. And I can tell you this, and I've had a refresher course trying to grow something out that way. The environment out there is very fragile. It's hard to grow anything. The soil is shallow, the clay is tough, the sandstone is near the top of the ground. And this thing is serious. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you very much.
My name is Mike Opitz. I'm at 2300 Carolyn Court. I'm here tonight representing the Sierra Club Oklahoma chapter. And for those who don't know, that's the statewide organization of Sierra Club members. The Sierra Club takes the Outer Loop study very seriously. I have represented the club on the Citizens Advisory Committee since June of last year, and I have personally attended every meeting of that committee since then. The club has been quiet to date on this issue because so far we have been satisfied with how the study was progressing. But that changed last month. I'd like to explain to you why we are now unsatisfied with the way the study's going, and plus I'd like to tell you a few things about the Loop study that you may not know and how that will relate to the resolution that is before you tonight. Originally, the transportation planners presented 2 purposes for performing that study. They've both already been discussed tonight. The main reason was to relieve traffic congestion on our area highways as it is expected in about the year 2020. A secondary reason was to provide a bypass for through traffic, including NAFTA trucks. Now, the Loop study has progressed in several stages. The most recently completed stage, they produced a scoring system, and they ranked each of the initial possible solutions, and there were over 50 of them. They then screened out all of them except the most favorable ones. As they proceed in the study, they will study the remaining solutions in detail and then compare them and produce one final answer. Now, I'm telling you this because of what has happened recently in the study group. Their conclusion it conflicts with the results of their recent analysis. A few minutes ago, Michele Moore referred to this problem. The study included a variety of what are called non-road solutions. That means better bus service, better rail service, carpooling incentives, separate high occupancy vehicle lanes on existing roads, and so on. And the results of the study's analysis show that 4 of the top 5 fall into this category, and 7 of the top 11 do as well. Now this means that maybe we can relieve future congestion without building any kind of a loop road at all. But for those of you who went to the December public meetings, as they were presented in Edmond and here in Norman, you didn't hear that. The study team presented 4 routes for a loop road. They glossed over the non-road options, and they mentioned them. When they mentioned them, they stated that they would be studied only in conjunction with a road. The club has 2 serious objections to this state of affairs. First of all, it's misleading, and it's a diversionary presentation of their results. It's just inaccurate. Secondly, it conflicts with what they told the advisory committee back in November, a full month before the public meetings. This provides clear evidence that the loop study team itself is in fact biased in favor of road-based solutions. The result was an unjust focus of both the media attention and the public attention on road-based solutions. This narrowing of the discussion is a disservice to Oklahoma City area residents. We deserve to know which solutions were truly the best solutions. Now, the club opposes building a loop road, and we have many reasons for that. It was enough to fill several pages in our latest official policy statement on the loop road. It's brand new, and I have copies here for anyone who wants one. To save time, I'll summarize the top 3 reasons here. First of all, the loop will not relieve very much rush hour congestion because it does not serve the central Oklahoma City area. The business district, the government complex, and the health sciences center complex will all be unserved by the loop. So how could it relieve rush hour congestion to those areas? There seem to be 2 reasons to build this loop. The first one, to provide the bypass, and secondly, to provide developmental profits for certain businesses and certain property owners along the loop's proposed path. Now, is this a good enough reason to build the loop? I say no. Finally, in the long run, more roads cannot be the answer to traffic congestion because eventually they encourage even more congestion. Now, I'll close by stating the Sierra Club's recommendations. The transportation planners are now asking where to build the loop. As far as the public's concerned, they have entirely skipped the question of whether to build it. But that's the important question. The club opposes building a loop road, but more than that, we question the need for a loop road. This does not mean we're questioning progress. We are insisting on smart progress. Our recommendation to the loop study team is, in the forthcoming detailed analysis, to address the remaining non-road options separately from and on equal footing with the remaining road-based options. Then at the end, compare the non-road options to the road options in the final screening. Our recommendation to you is to either drop this resolution or amend it to include the language I just stated. Thank you.
Charles Gaddis, live at 3729 Della. I live on the west side, and the least impact to the citizens has hit me right between the eyes. I see no need for this in its X, Y, and Z route because that does not relieve any traffic congestion. It seems like they're trying to relieve pollution, air, noise, surface pollution, and Norman says, hey, bring it to us. We want all of it. And I sympathize with the guy said about the bypass around Norman. It should go around. I mentioned earlier by way of Ardmore, I believe it was. And I discussed with my councilman that this information is not being put out. He mentioned it's on the TV. We don't get cable out there where we live. We don't see these meetings. We do not know what's going on. There's been something said of a newsletter, which a lot of people said is going to be a farce, and I kind of call it a propaganda sheet, but it would help. This information is for the select few that's putting this in. And I've heard a lot of questions tonight that I wasn't aware of. And if you don't vote this down, at least table it and get some answers for yourself as well as the people. Do not vote on this tonight. Let it go, get some answers, and try to get a proper resolution up. And it might be the proper one is don't build it. I've learned a lot here just a few minutes tonight, and I think you need to reconsider what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pam McIntosh, and I'm a landowner at 108th and Highway 9. And I speak for other homeowners in that area that are friends that could not be here this evening. I would like to say ditto, as you requested earlier, to all the previous speakers. And I would like to know how far east the proposed corridor is of Lake Thunderbird. Does anybody know?
Which corridor are you referring to, ma'am?
When you said earlier that the resolution was for the corridor to go east of Lake Thunderbird.
It's just east.
Out of the Norman city limits?
It would be all right.
Is it?
It could clear out to the county line.
It's still in the city of Norman limits, though. It's before 180th. Isn't that correct?
The proposal that we are saying is just east of the lake. We have no specific.
Okay, I think that proposal goes right through the Little Axe community, which is still in the city of Norman limits, and I think you're doing a disservice by putting it onto the Little Axe community. I also want to ask about the absentee Shawnee tribal lands that are owned in that area, if they've been involved in this process. And I want to suggest that the council not pass any resolution at all saying that we don't accept this. We will go for a no-build option, as Ms. Moore suggested. And that's really all I have to say.
My name is Michael Thomas. I live at 16700 East Tecumseh Road. I'm a little nervous, not used to public speaking. I attended a meeting last week with my city councilman, and our city manager was kind enough to attend and let us know basically what was going on. I have to admit that I was pretty surprised when I asked the city manager what the plans were, and he allowed that the city of Norman would like to support the XYZ route unless the I-35 bypass were to take to the east side of Norman. He said as long as the I-35 bypass goes to the east side of the lake, then the XYZ proposal would be most acceptable. If the I-35 bypass were to not go on that side, then they would propose, he said that y'all would propose to go for the ZZ route. Well, sorry to say that both of those run right over the middle of my house. I am from the Little Axe community. I represent quite a few people from there. You know, we get out here and I look this thing up and there's no proposals east of Norman. You know, we're already separated from the main part of Norman geologically by the lake. You know, we don't need any further separation than we have if we're still going to maintain city of Norman city limits. You got Harry Waller Road, Highway 102 within 10 miles that are both Highway 102's already established corridor. I have to agree with every previous person that spoke. I just don't see any of the proposed, ODOT proposed byways that are going to work. I'd have to say, please vote for no build. Thank you.
My name is Tom Elmore. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Transportation Institute. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Oklahoma City working on transportation policy matters on a national scale. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, I would plead with you to understand that we are at a pivotal moment in the history of the state of Oklahoma and the history of this community. The decisions we make regarding the transportation infrastructure that we build had better be good ones, because they will indelibly affect the futures of our children, our grandchildren, and their children. Not to mention the simple economic viability of the state of Oklahoma. I want to remind you that today, we're 48th in the nation in overall economic performance as a state, 45th in per capita income. The governor says we're on track in 2005 to fall behind Arkansas and New Mexico by that measure, and about to lose the United States congressional seat, while our more prosperous neighbors pick up seats. We are going to lose through this measure, by losing the congressional seat, our ability to compete for the federal dollars that our people are forced to send in. We're already considered a donor state. I've been part of this advisory, of the advisory panel of this MIS. And I want you to know that I will speak to you in very strong terms about being extremely disturbed by what I have seen. This process is not designed to get at the truth or to get at the best conclusion. It is a classic so-called Delphi method subterfuge. You know what I'm talking about. Meant to arrive at a preconceived goal of those who consider themselves the elite of this state. I hope that doesn't sound too much like conspiracy theory to you, but I stood on that panel, and I was told unequivocally that what I had to say would be just as fully explored as what everybody else had to say. But when the time came to explore it, it was shunted aside. The interesting thing about it was that I was the only one on the panel, of the panel members themselves, who brought along with me, as I have brought along tonight, the corroborating technical material that the others said was ridiculous. But it was produced by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, the Texas Department of Transportation, and the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. I want you to understand that what these people have done is taking you down the path you've been on for the last 40 years. Where are we today on that path? According to State Transportation Czar Neil A. Michele, serving simultaneously and without precedent as the ultimate power in transportation decision-making in the state of Oklahoma, both as Secretary of Transportation as well as Director of ODOT and Director of the Turnpike Authority. Folks, these are natural conflicts of interest. And yet this man is the most powerful decision-making force in the state of Oklahoma on these issues. And more often than not, over the last 15 years, over a number of tours of duty as Secretary of Transportation, he has been our Secretary of Transportation. By his own word, as he traversed the state in 1996, his policies have gotten us to this place in Oklahoma highway history. We today face $11 billion in unfunded highway maintenance need on highways we already have. When we build this loop, my friends, it's going to have to be maintained. And it's going to have to be maintained as an added expense against that $11 billion unfunded maintenance deficit. Today in the United States of America, the commercial railroads of this nation carry 40.6% of the nation's intercity freight ton mileage at absolutely no expense to the taxpayers. More safely, more efficiently, and more flexibly when you consider the intermodal option and that a lot of that ton mileage moves on those trains in intermodal truck trailers and containers. The trucking industry moving over the highways of this nation carries only 27.2% of the nation's intercity freight ton mileage. And yet this is where this $11 billion in unfunded highway maintenance need has come from. And to corroborate this, I would offer you the April 1991 position paper from ODOT's own engineers, which Secretary Michele and others in this MIS have sought to quash. I don't want to be taken down this road any further. How much more debt do we have to have? How much more debt do we have to pile on the backs of our children and our grandchildren before we wake up and realize that we are being sold by far the lesser of a number of transportation technology choices? I'm not going to stand here. I own some land that is close to one of these corridors, but that is not my chief concern. My chief concern is the future of the state, the economic viability of this state, and of my children and their children. And I'm telling you, folks, you've not gotten the facts from this MIS. This MIS seems to have been designed, in fact, to obscure the facts. I would plead with you to understand, after all, they're spending our money. They're not spending their money. And they're spending our money in ways that they would never spend their own. And now they're going to tell us that January 15th is the last day we have anything to say about it. Well, I want to tell you something, folks. It's not the last day. It's not their money. It's ours. And it's time for us to stand up and, if nothing else, take the government of our state back. Folks, you can help with this process. You can help with this by repudiating this ridiculous process that we've gone through over the last number of months. That's what needs to happen. And I plead with you to take a very close look at the well-documented technical information that I can offer you at any time. I thank you for your time, and I pray that you'll make the right decision.
My name is Patrick Ahern. I live in 3710 East Tecumseh Road. I do not know all the details about this loop, but I do know that if it runs through Norman, a lot of homes and wildlife will be destroyed. As a representative of our next generation, I do not want this loop to be built. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'm Carolyn Ahern. I want to say, first of all, I did not put my son up to this. Although I will say he's a very determined child, and you better not mess with him. Okay. I want to put yet one more face to low-density Norman. We've had a number of people from the north and eastern parts of this town speak tonight because we all have a lot at stake. We all have environments that are sensitive. Roadrunners, blue heron. My neighbor said he saw a black panther last week. I don't know. We all have property at stake. The original 2020 loop ran through, had a relatively narrow footprint, and it was designed, as my understanding, to allow reasonable, gradual development of the northern part of town. This seems like a reasonable thing. But as someone earlier pointed out, the corridor proposed, XYZ, runs centered on Tecumseh Road for about 6 miles. We're talking just between 12th and 48th, 30 homes. When I spoke with Mr. Sam Shehab of the Department of Transportation, his data is out of date. The most recent Landsat photos they're using for that area are from February of '98. There have been 3 houses finished along that road since that time. We are more densely populated than the state believes. Route F is a bad idea. Route XYZ is a bad idea for exactly the same reasons. We want to make sure that just because there aren't quite as many of us along Tecumseh and Franklin as there are along Route 9 and Street 48, that we still have a face and have the same concerns about losing property and environment. I also want to point out a couple of things I learned recently that you may not know. On the property of Kevin and Kim Wade on East Tecumseh Road are 2 historically protected properties, structures. One is the oldest bridge in Cleveland County. Another is a traveler's well that was put in the 1890s to serve the settlers coming in. There were difficulties getting a clear title on both those properties because there had to be written into the deeds preservation of those 2 properties. Those are at major risk with the proposed XYZ corridor. Also along there is the only waterfall in Cleveland County, and I have a geologist's word for this and a survey on that. All the areas affected by F, X, Y, and Z, and even ZZ are sensitive and fragile and worth preserving. I was delighted to hear the Sierra Club here asking us to look at the basic question of even whether to build. I was also delighted to hear no build options proposed by other speakers, and I encourage you to vote no on this resolution and to rethink the way we deal with the state on this terribly important matter. Thank you.
My name is Ed Kessler, and I live at 1510 Rosemont Drive. And I want to say that I support substantially Tom Elmore's position, but I have a few different slants to offer. We don't hear much about the national interest. We hear a lot about not in my backyard. I think the national interest is very much involved here. Do you know that the highway bill, the $200 billion highway bill passed in the last Congress, has a provision in it for public hearings, but it also has a provision that if there aren't public hearings, that's not appealable by the public. It's a very interesting bill. I think that instead of figuring out lame excuses for building the highway, we should give a lot more attention to how we develop a system that doesn't need a highway, and that's exactly what's lacking in the present study. Let's give some thought to how we can avoid an expenditure of $1 billion for a highway that may be unneeded. I realize that the highway is not planned to be built tomorrow. Maybe it should never be built. If you have a glass full of water and you start to empty it, the water comes out just as fast when the glass is nearly empty as when it's nearly full. That's our condition today in the oil industry, according to the projections of people who know a lot more about it than I do. And yet we're willing to pay enormous sums to defend what some would have us believe are our interests in the Persian Gulf, and to project this power apparently indefinitely into the future and make us more dependent on it through the building of unneeded roads in this country and more dependence on a relatively inefficient form of transportation. What we have is a state which is run by special narrow interests. And as Tom Elmore said, we need to take our government back. I also was a member and am a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Loop Highway, and I've attended, if not all the meetings, certainly most of them, 4 or so. And there's very little attention being given to alternates. They're brushed aside. We have a lot of confusing signals out there, and no one knows what the future will bring. But I think that the future, well, let me put it this way. We want economic development in our state, not necessarily physical growth, but economic development. And I submit to you that economic development would be far more furthered and favorably furthered by revision of a corrupt political process in the state than by anything else we can do. What specific recommendation do I have? My specific recommendation is that you either reject this motion or that you table it as a signal to the MIS process that they need to take another very serious look at what they're doing. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Richard Lynn, and after living 35 years in Norman, we recently moved to 298 Mallard Row in Goldsby. There were 2 purposes, as I understand the MIS study, that have to be fulfilled for this loop to be built, one of which is to reduce traffic on I-35. This relates to NAFTA trucks. It is reduction of traffic on I-35. It's in its entirety, Norman, Moore, Oklahoma City, Edmond. The second purpose is that local traffic issues should be addressed as well. I've heard a lot of speakers tonight question whether there's local traffic needs here, and also question whether the loop should be built at all. If you feel, as a council, that this loop is going to be built, and it's incumbent upon you to declare a preference in the matter as opposed to saying that there's no preference and you're against all options or ask for further study, then I think that you should probably follow your past council actions and your planning department's hard work, which, as I understand it, declares that the 2020 plan was advantageous to the city, both for the citizens and for business interests. If you, your resolution currently talks in terms of ZZ being an acceptable option. It also does not speak directly to F, which, as you well know, I'm sure, is the state's preference. It's their most highly rated corridor, the one they really would like to build, and the one probably objected to the most by Norman citizens. Your resolution doesn't speak to F. It talks around that. But I would urge you, if you feel like that the 2020 plan had merit, that you suggest that the 2020 plan be followed. That's your preference. And I would also urge that you strike Section 10. ZZ is not a viable option. It's 30 miles from I-35 to where the highway even turns north. What's that going to do for, how much traffic is going to be on that? And if the Turnpike builds it, it'll be less activity than my recent trip down the Indian Nations Turnpike, which, as you know, ain't paying its own way. The bypass may solve the NAFTA truck issue and divert traffic traveling through. I don't know. But I would urge you, to, in your resolution, to strike Section 10 and to speak your mind unequivocally. If you support 2020, say so. Say also that F and ZZ are totally unacceptable to the city of Norman. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer from my position, but that's how I feel. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robin Stead. I live on 48th and Etowah. I lived in Norman for many years, and now I live in Noble. I have one major concern, and that is that almost everyone who stood up here tonight has said that they really didn't know that this was going on, about this resolution. And it's my understanding that this resolution was only available just a few days ago. And this resolution says that it supports the routes X, Y, and Z. And those routes are contrary to Norman 2020, which was the result of a comprehensive plan passed by the city of Norman. And the state statutes require that if you're going to amend a comprehensive plan, that the city is required to give certain notice to its citizens so that they will have an opportunity to protest. Many people have stood up here tonight and protested, but they haven't been able to do so appropriately, and most of them haven't even had the resolution in hand to be able to read. And I think that that's a real concern, and for that reason, I would urge the council to table this resolution until the citizens have had an opportunity to review the proposed resolution and to protest if they think that that's appropriate. And the other thing is that we all know that the city of Norman is not going to be the final decision maker in regard to this issue. But if the city of Norman states by resolution that it supports 3 of the 5 proposed corridors and could live with the 4th option, I think you're giving a very big stick to the final decision makers, and I don't think that that reflects the will of the people of Norman. And I would urge you to vote no tonight, or at the very least to table this issue until the citizens have had a chance to properly protest if appropriate. Thank you for your time.
other people? All right, members of the council. Councilmember Scholl.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to amend the resolution to strike paragraphs 9 and 10 and replace it with a new paragraph 9 that states, City of Norman supports the no-build option, period.
Have a second? Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Councilmember Vaughn.
It's been brought to my attention over the last several days by receiving numerous phone calls from the constituents and other concerned citizens in the rural areas of Norman, particularly the proposal of the outer loop and the resolution that's before us tonight. With few exceptions, they are adamantly against any development in East Norman of the outer loop. They feel that the limitations of development established by the 2020 plan are threatened and their quality of life in the rural area. Most of them support the no build on any of the options that's listed to Norman. I would ask that other options be sought, offered to the state, such as expansions of I-35 and the alternate locations outside the city limits of Norman. As a city, we truly do voice our opposition to the proposed outer loop plan. When the resolution before us concedes to that options that have been forced upon us by the state of Oklahoma, I think we can't support that. Therefore, I cannot, in any good conscience, support this resolution.
Any other discussion?
You know, I came here tonight thinking, you know, I'm going to support 2020, was a big, you know, believer in that. But, you know, you sit here and then you listen to everybody, and there were a lot of really good speakers. And the very last guy said something that just kind of triggers me more in the way of common sense than anything. The real problem that we have in Norman, obviously, is with I-35 and all the congestion and stuff that goes with it. Think of all the monies that would be spent on this loop if we could just take about half that and continue to do some of the things that are being done in major high-traffic metropolitan areas. So I'm going to support Councilmember Scholl's move and say that we need to send a strong message that let's put the bulk of the money that we have in transportation to where it's needed and do all we can to work along the expansion of the I-35 corridor, which is where the real need of the people of Norman lies.
Anyone else? Have an amendment to the motion? Everybody understand the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? Amendment passes. We have, we're not through yet. We have the resolution as amended. Any other discussion on the resolution as amended?
Mayor?
Leonard.
I sit here and intrigued by the paradox of East Norman. And I've been on this council since 1991. And all I have heard from people in East Norman is, give us some roads out here. Here we come with an opportunity.
Now, let's be fair.
I didn't boo and hiss when you were talking, so I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to say my piece now. All I've heard from the people in East Norman is give us a better road. If we support this resolution as we have just amended it now, I assume that each of you are willing in Ward 5 to support a special road district to improve the roads out there where you are with the assessments related to build those roads. Because this is our only opportunity we have to seize a significant amount of money to provide you with better access to that area. If we do not go along with the plan, which has been in place since the early 1960s, to provide a loop road around Norman and Oklahoma City metro area, we will have withdrawn from the plan which we have had in place for nearly 30 years. I think it's very important that you realize that when you ask us to go to the no-build alternative, because we will be withdrawing from the approved plan which has been in place for all these years. The major investment study which has been underway here, I don't think you understand what it was all about. It is to look at alternative corridors and to find places where we can build a road, if we build a road, and if we have the funds to build a road, in such a way as to avoid, I heard Indian burial grounds, tribal areas, churches, homes, and other critical environmental areas. That was the purpose of this study. Many of you act as though this study was targeted to attack your particular house and your particular thing. Norman is a town of 100,000 people in a population of approximately 1 million in the metro area. It has been a major activity of the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments since the 60s to try to provide some form of unified transportation plan for the area. You know, I find the idea of a no-build paradox something that does not in any way match with what I heard when we did 2020 plan, and we had nearly thousands of people involved in that particular plan from all over Norman. This selected the corridors X, Y, and Z, and it showed, some of you said it would violated that showing. That corridor showed a connection to a north-south road on the east side of Norman. That has been there. I'm sorry if you didn't see it, but it was there. It's important that you know it. I remember the bumper stickers that said, "Pray for me, I drive on East Norman roads." And now we come in here with an opportunity to provide with you an environmentally sound, adequate road system, and you come in and say, no, we don't want any roads at all. Well, you may be going to get what you want. Don't pray for something, you may get it.
Councilmember Tower.
I guess the first thing I've got to say is I'm a little shocked because in some ways I don't know if anyone on council really expected it to go this way tonight. And I thought of saying something to Chris's amendment, but I'll say it to the major motion. Part of tonight is trying to deal with reality and trying to deal with common sense. And there's going to be a balance and some trades in the future that each one of you is going to have to keep your awareness up of this issue, because this won't go away. And your determination that we work something out that's good for not just East Norman, but the whole city of Norman. Because this will have some effect on I-35 if we do not build. And it will have a big effect on Norman and all the traffic through it. I was somewhat responsible for getting this to where it is, in that after we did 2020, we pushed at ACOG to try and have this study done so we could locate where a corridor could go. In all the different discussions that I've heard tonight, and especially to Bob Wilson, if he thinks that sometimes you aren't heard and things are done deal, let it be known. I listened last night, and it really made a difference. I regret in a way that we started this process because we thought the loop might be something 20 years from now, and we just wanted to make sure that it didn't affect us now. Now I come to question
some of the decisions that were made even before that of why it even ended up on our plan. It was a part of a central regional transportation plan, and we just adopted it into 2020. And that was one of the things last night in discussing this, that sometimes maybe we do make mistakes, or maybe we need to go back and question. Because at one time, the city of Norman even suggested putting a road, a turnpike, straight down 48th connecting into Highway 9, which would have thrown a tremendous amount of traffic both in East Norman and on Highway 9. But having said that, I think one of the things that I was really concerned about is that at some point in the future, there may be a loop that will be a bypass for I-35 to get around Oklahoma City. And we will be affected by that. We may not be affected by a loop right now if the no-build option really is considered and adopted, but at some point, people will consider. The Transportation Department or the Department of Transportation, the Turnpike Authority, will consider a loop for a bypass, and this may be from federal monies. So we've got to think of what the alternatives are, whether it's I-35 and improving I-35 so the commutes aren't so bad, or whatever. But we've got to keep in mind this is just one piece of the process, and we may be rethinking how we thought about transportation in this area tonight. But we've got to keep that on the table. Councilmember Pipes.
I've worked at the state level in government for years and years and years, and a lot at the Capitol. And I'm against, I would love to be no build, okay? But the state has the power to do this. We sent a legislature and a governor up there a few years ago that passed $1 billion road program that's drawn down general revenue in massive amounts that's hurting other services in this state. And now we're going to require cuts to indirectly support that kind of road program. The people at the Capitol that are in charge of this deal, not us. And it's not just here, it's all over the state. They can't hire enough engineers to put this road program into place. Have the power to do this because they believe they received a mandate by being elected by those of you out there, and I don't know who you voted for, that roads are good for the economy, that we should build roads. And we've all been down the Indian Nations Turnpike, well, at least 5 of us. And some of these other boondoggles that the Oklahoma Transportation Commission has put into place. All those people are nominated and placed on there by whoever's governor at the time. All the people that run ODOT are put into place by whoever's governor at the time. They all have eminent domain to do these things. My situation is there were several much poorer alternatives that were placed against us in recent weeks and over the period of, since I've been here anyway. Michael's been on this a lot longer than I have. And I'm not going to argue which is better or not, but going up 60th Street is obviously a disaster for Norman and for 2020. The northern loop is in 2020 more or less. I think there are questions about the 2-mile buffer that still have to be clarified because, 800 feet is what I've been told is all this is going to take. But what are the restrictions going to be on the property owners on either side? And once again, that will come from the state, not from the city council. This action has no force or effect of law. It's advisory only to the state officials. And I guarantee you, we're sending double messages. People think roads are good, chambers of commerce,
legislative delegations all over the state. I mean, I was at the Capitol. I didn't work on the road program, but these, I mean, they were at the trough, you know, can I have my road? Can I have my road? Okay. They want to build more roads. They want to draw down more general revenue to do it because they think that the public wants this. So if you don't want these things, you need to not be talking to us. I mean, I think it's good you're talking to us. I think most of us were sincerely trying to mitigate what were some disastrous alternatives by placing this resolution up here. It's not perfect. And obviously it's not supported. But I'm telling you, if you want to impact this thing, you're going to have to go to the governor's office. And you're going to have to go to ODOT, and you're going to have to go to the legislature. Because the chips are up there, they're not here. And for you to spend much time blaming us for this is wasting your energy.
Councilmember Haralson.
Well, like Mike, I went through the 2020 program, and that was a multi-year process. This corridor was on that plan. I attended multiple meetings. The Sierra Club was there. I didn't hear one voice opposed to it. Sierra Club didn't oppose it. We've had this as a plan for many years. Your staff builds future plans, future considerations, and puts a lot of time based on a plan. In one night, we have thrown out a plan that has been a major source of community and effort, of community involvement. Whether you agree with it or not at this point in time, the process did happen. The community did have input. What happens now, I think I've heard several people say it's beyond our control. I think what we had an opportunity tonight was to at least state a preference based on what planning had brought us to. I don't think at this point that we have, we've made a statement, but we don't have a plan. I'd be very concerned at this point what's going to happen with us. I just hope that you keep that in mind, that you can't, for planning purposes for a city, for a community, you can't change your plan every time you have a change in popular opinion. There has to be some consistency. Thank you.
Councilmember Polk.
I think what occurred tonight is that this council and the community took the courage to say, let's reevaluate what direction we're going to go. Do we want more roads or not?
Councilmember Vaughn.
I'd like to redirect one of the comments of Councilman West. I don't think rural East Norman has ever asked the city to give us 4-lane roads out there. All we've really ever... I think all we've ever asked for and what we duly expect is a safe road that gets us to and from our homes and our children to school. And that's what we propose for East Norman Road.
Councilmember Shelton.
You know, the comment that Councilmember Haralson made that in the 2020 discussion, it was not by any sense of the imagination unanimous as we talked about the transportation plan and what would happen on the east side. There was a lot of opposition. That thing was such a major plan overall that, you know, I heard countless comments at many of the public meetings that there was much consideration. I think that people just thought, you know, what the comm plan is something that is a working plan that can be modified, and people realized as these things would come forward, they would have a chance for input, they would have a chance to voice their opinion. And so, you know, while at the same time we adopted it, I think there were a number of council members that had reservations about this particular part of the transportation plan, and I think that came out tonight.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I think tonight there was information that was provided by the public that was compelling. And I think I just felt I had to act on that compelling information. But I'd also like to assure some of my other council members that my ultimate goal is to protect the integrity of the 2020 plan. And quite frankly, I had the opportunity to observe and participate with the early formulations of the 2020 plan with Professor Ian McHarg, Professor Emeritus from Harvard University, who was really the guiding force of some of the basic ideas of we're trying to protect Norman's aquifer, we're trying to protect Norman's water supply, we're trying to protect Norman's environment, and also have a quality of growth into the future. For the past several months, the City Council has been grappling with how are we going to supply water into the future. And on the other hand, here we have this proposal to say that we're going to endanger our water supply. And it was incongruous to me. And I also like to assure that, well, I don't know, I also have had experience working in state government. I formerly worked for the governor of Florida. And, you know, local concerns matter. And at the federal level, that's true also, that projects are redesigned when there's compelling environmental issues or compelling issues such as was brought out tonight about Indian properties. Those change projects at a federal and a state level. So I don't think our voice is lost in the wind. Quite frankly, I think it's important, like the mayor said, that we do make a firm statement. And I believe the information provided by the people this evening was, in fact, compelling.
I wanted to say one more thing. It's sort of a little bit of answer to Harold and also a comment just in general. Because we wipe the outer loop or any corridor off our map on 2020 or decide that that's really the direction that we feel Norman ought to go, does not necessarily mean that this MIS study is going to share the same thing and we will have two studies that say different things and we could lose. I think the thing that we've got to do is figure out what our strong and consistent message is that we're going to tell the Department of Transportation and the Turnpike Authority that we stay consistent with and say, this is what we want for the city of Norman. And that's going to take not just the east side, but us who are more central areas as well, figuring out how we can address problems in the future that may not include an outer loop. And we've got to be very consistent, otherwise Department of Transportation is, you know, they're into building roads and they will think Norman doesn't care. And we've got to make sure that they know we do.
Good evening. My name is Al Brooks. I live at 1206 Concho Drive, which is just about 72nd and East Robinson. We have never asked on the east side for any more roads, just to take care of the ones that we've got. We don't need any more roads. And as far as building new roads and all of that, these people that are voting to build these roads, they don't have a house in the middle of that road. They're not interested in that. That's not a problem to them. All we want you people on the council to do is to back the citizens that are here to express their opinion and go with listen to what we're trying to say. We don't need that road out there. If they want to build a loop outside of Norman, around, that's fine. That we can't do anything about that. But try to go with what we want done as our elected officials. Thank you.
One final comment in this discussion. You know, the road building apparatus, and I've been involved in it for 40 years, so I speak with a small amount of bias. is there to provide services that are needed. And as I said earlier, we have to figure out how we're going to move people and goods around Oklahoma and around the nation. And each ward in Norman, we have heard from one ward primarily tonight. When we did the 2020 plan, we had representatives from all the wards in on the comment. And I hope as we look at this resolution, we will understand that we've got 1/8 of Norman that is commented here tonight. We have 7/8 that have yet to be heard from.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Russ Roberts. I'm a landowner east of Norman. At the VOTEC meeting that was held on December the 8th, I presented and I didn't bring it with me tonight. I didn't know I'd be coming up here, but I presented something, and I don't know if y'all know it exists or not. But in 1994, under the leadership of Governor Walters, and if you put this into perspective, and correct me if I'm incorrect here, Bob, or anybody else here, there's several people who've been with the state and worked, but at that time, Neil McCaleb held a key leadership role with HNTB. Is that correct? Jimmy, you'll know that. Is that correct? Jimmy Berry, you're the director of... I'm the director of public works at the City of Norman, but at the time, Mr. McCaleb was in charge of HNTB. Is that correct? I had a key position with him. They created a feasibility study under Governor Walters to build not a highway, but a full-blown turnpike. And there is at the Capitol, there is at the OTA, this feasibility study exists. When I brought this up at the meeting at VOTEC, those of you who were there will testify that the officials, ODOT, OTA, and OCOG, it caught them off guard. They round robin for a minute and came back with an answer, oh, well, that's one of 30 feasibility studies. Well, the fact of the matter and research shows, which they have since retracted that statement, that it's not one of 30 feasibility studies. It is the only feasibility study that exists for the loop of East Norman. It shows where the turnpike will be. It shows which houses would be X'd off. It even uses the terminology that the houses would be residentially displaced. Now, my point here is the same. I'm disturbed. I felt very disturbed at the meeting at VOTEC because I did not feel that the representatives were forthcoming. I felt they were deceptive, and I think anybody at that meeting felt the same way. I firmly believe that if we don't align ourselves with the 2020 plan and with the City of Norman, they've got a plan to reserve East Norman and to make it a wonderful place and a very unique community in between Norman and Lake Thunderbird. If we don't work with the City of Norman, what these people are telling us is it's not going to matter what we want, folks. OTA does not build free highways. They're going to wind up putting it wherever they doggone well please, and we're going to pay for it, and we're not. And you're going to have less limited access because it's going to be a turnpike. If you study the major roads that have been built in this state, you're going to find that they're turnpikes. Neil McCaleb came out in the paper just a few weeks ago and made a statement that only 4 miles in the last 50 years have been built were free roads. We're going to have a turnpike in our backyard if we don't work together. And it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to destroy the unique thing that we have here in the City of Norman. So I'm very much, I realize there's a lot of confusion here, but folks, take a trip, take an afternoon and ask to see the feasibility studies for the east side of Loop Norman and see what they show you. Because there's only one that exists. Jimmy, is that correct? That is correct, isn't it? It's the only one I found. And I've spent several hours and several trips up to OTA. I had another thought here, and I'm having a senior moment here, so.
That's reserved for me.
Is that reserved for you, Bob? But I want to be redundant here a moment and say that I truly believe, and I visited with Pat, I visited with Bob, and some of the other people that are supporting this 2020 loop, the 2020 plan for East Norman, and they are trying, their best interests are for the city of Norman as a whole. And I think we need to come together very quickly and come as a stand if we want what we don't want, and that what we don't want is a turnpike in between Norman and Lake Thunderbird. And if we don't stand for that, at least make that position in our resolution.
Okay, we have a motion before us as amended. Before we vote, I want to, Patrick left. I guess he had to go do his homework, or it's his bedtime or something. I don't know. But I appreciate a young man that would take the courage to stand up and talk to the council. We also appreciate all of your comments, and that we encourage you to express those comments to ODOT and the OTA. Like I say, this isn't our project, but what you said needs to get to those people. So take the time to write it down and get it up there. No matter how this vote comes out, that's not the issue. The issue is you need to get your feelings expressed to the proper place. Okay? We have a motion.
Yeah. Can you restate the motion as amended?
Okay. We certainly can. We're very capable of doing that.
The amendment that passed was to delete paragraphs 9 and 10 from the resolution and to add the language in paragraph 9 that says the City of Norman supports the no-build option.
Understood? All in favor of that, raise your hand. Opposed?
The resolution as amended passes by a vote of 7-2. Voting against?
Please, thank you.
Councilmember Haralson and Councilmember West.
Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break.